Hello, and welcome to this Team of Destiny edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of purplePTSD.com and VikingsTerritory.com, which has a fancy new layout. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Makes me feel special. I am here with Mr. Joe Super Bowl Press Pass Oberly.
Super? There was a Super Bowl? What are you talking about?
I heard there was something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was at the tattoo convention, so I missed most of it. But how are you doing, man?
I'm good. It was a long week, but a fun week, and I'm ready to roll with the next iteration of the Minnesota Vikings.
Ugh, you sound so enthused. Joe writes for purplePTSD.com and thesportspost.com, and also Luke Braun is here.
I exist.
Always, yay! Another week of a reality with Luke Braun in it. He writes for Purple PTSD, he writes for Vikings Territory, and he also co-hosts the Pocket Protectors podcast over with the Climbing the Pocket fellas. So we'll get into the big game in a minute, but for once we weren't like 2 hours or a day before breaking news on this show, which usually happens to us, and then by the time the show comes back around, the news is kind of already old news. But we're recording the show a day late on Thursday night. We usually record on Wednesday nights. And
you did that. It's on purpose, just to catch
totally.
us.
Well, I got all these.
We were just waiting for this news. Yeah.
All my sources out there were telling me that you guys don't enjoy my company.
Everyone's got sources nowadays.
That's pretty reliable sources you got.
Yeah, they're spot on. I can feel it. But yeah, finally it feels like it was a slow process, but the Vikings waited to interview John DeFilippo, the guy that they apparently wanted the whole time, and they interviewed him and they hired him.
Didn't they? After him. Wow. Didn't they? Really turned that thing around. After him. I was reading somewhere that there was a possibility that if Frank Wright were to leave to take the Colts head coaching job because Josh McDaniels bailed there, that they would have promoted they'd have promoted, what's his name?
Flip. Let's go with Flip.
Yeah, let's call him Flip. They'd have promoted him to OC, so I think the Vikings pounced on it. He even had an interview with Arizona for the head coaching job as well earlier.
He's had a couple head coaching interviews. He's actually called Coach Flip in the Eagles facility. That's his loving nickname. So Coach Flip is a nice nickname. Although we already had a Coach Flip here, so maybe we should.
Yeah, that's tough for me because when you set that in a text, I thought, what? It's, I worked with Flip Saunders at the Timberwolves, so special place in my heart. So I'll have a tough time. I guess I better learn his name.
Yeah, one of two things can happen there. And I know we talked about this a little bit last week with JR on the show, and I think, Luke, you were the one that said that this, more than the Stefanski move, since the news earlier today was that it was between those two guys, felt like he might not stick around here as long, or I'm just interested in your take on it.
My take on the hire, I mean, I'm extremely excited about getting him. I was pretty excited about both DeFilippo and Stefanski. I would have been really happy with either. The only real drawback to DeFilippo is that he's like already has head coaching buzz. So if he is as good as they say he is, he probably only lasts one season here. But I guess that's an easy ledge to talk yourself off of, because like that means that if he does leave, that means we were really good, and that's awesome. And it's also a really good moment to have. Like, if you're going to have a guy like DeFilippo, who is extremely smart, and we can talk more about like him as his merits as an offensive coordinator, but having a good offensive coordinator hire right now is really important, because we're about to make a franchise QB decision, and both Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer have hinted that the OC is going to have a huge say in that. So having a smart voice in the room is really important.
Absolutely, especially a guy who's done well with quarterbacks. I mean, he had one quarterback on a trajectory for a league MVP for the regular season, and then he had the other quarterback that replaced him get the MVP of the Super Bowl. It's pretty impressive. He's he's been around a while, as has Stefanski, but it's funny to look back at Stefanski was around here when Childress was around, and it got me to thinking. I wonder why he hasn't ascended more quickly or sooner than this, because right now he's, the word is that he'll be heading off to go with Schumer in New York, which makes sense because, Pat Schumer's probably going to call plays and have a lot to say on the offense, so he can probably groom him into the OC position. And DeFilippo has had that experience for 1 year in Cleveland, so I mean, I think that's part of what the reason they brought him in here is because, he knows what that job is. I never thought about it like Lucia said that could mean he's down the road very soon. But, I could see him being here 2 years and getting himself established. And, boy, it's going to be interesting for him right out of the gate because a huge decision for this team is the quarterback. And like I say, he'll have a lot to say with that. So I think it's a good hire.
And that has to be probably why he kind of hit a plateau here, just because the Vikings obviously don't have the greatest history with developing quarterbacks, especially, from Childress through now. It's been, outside of Teddy, it's just been a lot of,
it was like Ponder and Teddy are really the only two since Childress.
They had T-Jack, but that was just, that seemed to be a pretty big Childress thing.
Yeah, he never turned out. He wasn't as bad as Ponder. Ponder was just a big old reach whiff.
Tavares has got a Super Bowl ring, baby.
I thought I would never, ever hear that. I'm surprised. To be honest, I was pretty anti-T-Jack guy back in the day, so, good for him for carving out a career this long in the league, I guess, even though he's about as broke as Adrian Peterson appears to be. But from that standpoint, though, from the offensive coordinator standpoint, before we kind of talk about how that might dictate what the Vikings are doing at the quarterback position, or even part of it, since they're kind of part and parcel of the same thing. Luke, you were talking off air about his time in Cleveland, and do you think that would give us any indicators as to what he might do in Minnesota, or do you think some of the stuff that they did in Philadelphia with that apparently unstoppable offense that they put together the last,
so he was hired by Mike Pettin during his single year in Cleveland. Mike Pettin and John DeFilippo go way back, which is now it's fun. They're across the division from each other. But he had. I really liked what he was doing in 2015 in Cleveland. And if you look at like articles from 2015 and like how Cleveland media was reacting to him and responding to what he was doing, there was a lot of positive vibes around John DeFilippo in Cleveland, which is really, really hard to accomplish in Cleveland.
I was just going to say, you're going to have to pull that soundbite out of the show and save it, because I don't think it's ever been uttered in the past 30, 40 years. Really like what he's doing in Cleveland. That's a rarity.
Yeah. And he had Josh McCown and Johnny Manziel were the two quarterbacks that year, and they made a switch midseason. Josh McCown had probably a top 3 or 4 season in his career. It was super comparable to the season Josh McCown just had with the Jets, and John Morton, who also had a whole bunch of hype as a good offensive coordinator, although apparently he's a jerk, so they fired him, or something, like nobody liked him or something like that. That was a weird situation. But and then with Johnny Manziel, he really looked like he possibly could have turned into an NFL quarterback near the end of that year with DeFilippo. And it was really night and day from Johnny Manziel in his rookie year, where his offensive coordinator was Kyle Shanahan. So to compare favorably against Kyle Shanahan, and now a lot of people are saying that in Philadelphia, people who have interviewed and worked with him say he reminds them a lot of Sean McVay. So being compared favorably to Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan is like, that's a solid combination of dudes to be like the hybrid of. And I think what we see from Philadelphia, like, and I guess we can talk more about the Super Bowl later if you want, but like a huge driving force of Philadelphia's run was analytics. and their desire to go for it on key fourth downs and stuff that made a huge difference in all 3 of Philadelphia's playoff games. And I think DeFilippo can lift those concepts from Doug Peterson, as well as a whole bunch of the actual play design concepts that Doug Peterson uses, and bring them over here. Those are really, really innovative, new, good play designs that modern defenses haven't figured out yet. So I'm super excited about this hire, especially when you compare it to the other guys we could have gotten, like Dan Campbell or Darrell Bevel or Mike McCoy, all these guys that have like kind of been around. Dan Campbell's a little younger, but like these like old retreads that would just kind of like copy paste the same scheme that like has had mixed results over the course of their entire career and like not really have any interest in innovation. I think DeFilippo will have interest in innovation, and that's why I'm very excited about him as an offensive coordinator. I think that was a huge reason Pat Shurmur improved and was able to put out the season he put out despite not really having an ideal quarterback situation. And I think DeFilippo can like replicate those same factors that made Shurmur successful in 2017.
How long do you think it is before Mike Zimmer takes him into a room and say, "What the heck did you do to my defense? How'd you beat my defense up so badly?" No, I'm just
That was probably the first question of the interview.
Yeah, they might be talking about that as we speak.
Exactly. I think, I read somewhere that apparently Doug Peterson has in his ear the entire game someone telling him, the analytic numbers on how well a certain play would work in this situation the entire game. That's got to be
decisions every time.
Pardon me?
He made perfect decisions every time through the whole playoffs, which was really the only Eagles that I watched.
It all worked out, but he did really well. I mean, you gotta love the gambler. I mean, a couple times I'm sitting out there looking, it's going, wow, this is awesome. He's going for it, But then again, he was going against just an average defense, but still, he at the right time and the right play, he made some decisions, and that's what made that game so entertaining. But, yeah, and that's what I think it's until yesterday. I'm sitting there talking with people saying, how the Vikings going to compete with these guys? They are ascending, and they've got the great staff. They've got a coach who's innovative, a coach who's aggressive until somebody figures it out how to turn that around. And they've got, both of their lines are intact. I guess they have 20 starters signed for next year. And at some point they're going to run into contract problems, but for now they're going to, and they're going to get a would-be MVP quarterback next year back at the helm. So it's like now the Vikings have a little bit of inside information about what's going on there, and that might help them.
Do the Vikings do any like heavy analytical work like on that level? I know it seems
but they do have analytics guys.
They do a little, and I think the decisions that they make, especially from a team-building perspective, I don't know if they're informed by analytics, but they've made a lot of decisions in the last few years that analytics would agree with, like drafting Anthony Barr and Daniel Hunter, huge analytics darlings. A lot of the contract decisions that they've made in terms of like where they've decided to spend their money, like analytics. We've talked about this a lot in the last few weeks over at the Pocket Protectors podcast, which if you want to get to know a little more about analytics, we talk a lot about it, really favors the secondary over the pass rush in terms of where you're going to spend your money on defense. And the Vikings have spent on Harrison Smith and Xavier Rhodes and spent a lot more draft capital in the secondary than they have in the pass rushers, even though they paid Griffin and Linval. They've put a lot of draft capital into the secondary. That's something that analytics would agree with. Even though I'm not sure if they made that with that in mind, it seems like there is some level of influence.
Okay, but you're saying that like during the game they're working that into like what plays work on certain situations?
Or just like when to go for it on fourth down kind of situations. Like there's like the no man's land, quote unquote, where you're too close to the other end zone for a punt to really be helpful. Like if you punt from your own or from the opponent's 40.
Hello?
I think Luke.
Did we lose him?
Maybe he got snapped up by the Vikings.
It could be. If you, as an analytics guy, if you punt from your own 40 or from the opponent's 40, you got a pretty rotten place kicker, I'm thinking.
And that ends the show. Yeah, well, I think he'll join back on in a second.
Absolutely. So anyway, I'm not a huge analytics guy, but I certainly tip my hat to it and know how big of a deal it is in the game today. And boy, you have to keep up. And I know that Zimmer wasn't grudgingly an analytics guy. I mean, I remember him complaining about it in some press conferences. Well, sooner or later, like the next year, they hired somebody to start working on analytics. And like I said, I don't think they're deep into it, but I think that's about to change with the hire of DeFilippo and just the way the league is changing. So, Luke, does it sounds like you're back?
I guess I got lost.
We thought you got hired by the team mid-podcast. Had to add a Linux. They liked what you were putting down.
I guess my internet cut out for a second there. I will say I do know that Pro Football Focus has holds 30 of the 32 teams as clients. They offer services, mostly database services, to 30 of the 32 teams. And the Vikings are not one of the two that refuses to hire Football Focus.
Well, I was going to say with what Joe said, I know the quotes that I think back on Zimmer about analytics there's been a couple times where he's kind of questioned the process, I think, that Pro Football Focus uses in regards to, like, how do they know what player is supposed to do what on every single play, I think has been criticism.
most of what Pro Football Focus most of what PFF sells to teams isn't. I mean, the grades. You can get the grades for $40, so I'm sure they have access to that. But a lot of what PFF sells to teams is their player participation data, which is just game-by-game charting of who lines up where. That's just useful data for coaches. But they do, a lot of teams do like grades, and especially they like the way that Pro Football Focus is able to split it up into, like, run blocking and pass blocking plays and stuff like that. So that's useful information, and I do know that the Vikings take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think Zimmer came along grudgingly, but I think he's a smart enough guy to realize that there's some value in it. And like I was saying, this is exciting because it's probably only gonna help more. And if you go get whooped up on by a team that's heavily steeped in it, you might want to take a look and say, okay.
Well, and they just put up 41 on the Patriots in the Super Bowl. So
I was gonna say,
I think it's okay.
Remember when the Dolphins befuddled Belichick with the Wildcat, and that kind of took the league by storm the next few seasons, and still kind of exists, despite the fact that I can't stand it personally. This seems like a larger version of that, like the fact that they were just able to do what they did on Sunday against.
I would argue, and I'm going to talk about this a lot now that we have, like, somebody from that staff, but the analytics that the Eagles use, like, people look at analytics and they think of it as a gimmick like the Wildcat was, like it's some special tricky thing that teams will, like, once they figure it out, it'll just go away like the Wildcat did. Analytics is just information. All it is a different way of tracking information and splitting up data so that you know, like, hey, they're good at defending this kind of thing on third down. It's really very similar in concept to scouting, and just tape study, but you counted. You said, hey, they were really good on third downs. That's a thing. That's a concept that your quality control coaches and all your tape study people are going to look at. All analytics is saying, oh, they were 70% on third down instead of just nebulous. They were good. Right. And analytics is just information that helps you make decisions. It's not some gimmick.
Have you heard somebody say that it's a gimmick that's going to go away? I've not heard that.
People who are hating on analytics really treat it like it's the Wildcat. I mean, if you look at the comments that, like, Hugh Jackson has said about it, and a lot of the stuff coming out of the Browns camp when they, like, fired Sashi, the stuff John Dorsey has said, they really treat it like it's the Wildcat.
And I just made that
very different
comparison too. But I guess I wasn't as sure of what made Philadelphia so successful against them or against the Vikings, whether it was analytics.
It's just a sounder decision-making process rather than just kind of saying, like, a lot of coaches go on their gut with like fourth down decisions and play calling decisions and stuff, and analytics is just a way of removing that human element. Not entirely, but at least giving you a guideline so that you're not just kind of stabbing in the dark on like what you feel maybe is the right choice, I guess, right now.
Yeah,
just add some certainty to it.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, and it sounds like it's also impacting what moves they make in regards to the draft or free agency, where they spend their money. It's a pretty revolutionary time for the NFL, it sounds like. But
I'm not a hater on it, but I've always maintained throughout that there's plenty of value in those numbers, but it isn't the entire picture. You have to have some of that gut. You have to have some of that human element involved in the decision making as well. But when you're in the heat of the moment and you're sitting there on the sidelines, you got about 10 seconds to make a decision, and someone says, 70% of the time they suck on this play. Then let's run that one. So I mean that is helpful. It's probably going to be interesting just to see how it changes. And it for DeFilippo, he's going to get the keys to the car here, where had he stayed in Philadelphia, he probably wouldn't have, because you still got Peterson there, who's an offensive mind that's calling plays. So it's going to be exciting to watch, and interesting to see how it affects Zimmer and how he runs his defense.
Definitely. And what do you guys have any initial thoughts on? It's really hard to tell, but I guess kind of that's what we're doing here. On what impact that might have on the QB search. I know we've talked about Kirk Cousins a lot the last few weeks, and there's been a couple other things out there in regards to Cousins showing interest to the Vikings.
I know the answer to that, Joe. I just can't say.
Ooh. You are our Super Bowl champion. I guess the better question would be, who do you think would make the most sense out of the three that were on the team last year? Do you think that the fact that Cousins played in the NFC East has anything to do with the decision? Or that was kind of my mindset. I wrote an article that I felt when I published it could be taken out of context, because I put something in there basically saying that I felt like the Vikings needed to do something drastic to keep up with not only the Eagles, but with a lot of the guys returning in the NFC, like Rodgers or Ezekiel Elliott next season. And I felt like I was kind of advocating for doing something crazy just for the sake of doing something crazy, which wasn't really the point of it. I just wasn't maybe it was a little more emotional than it needed to be, but I just felt like for me to get excited or emotionally invested in the team, I felt like maybe that was the move they needed to make. So that's kind of a 20-part question, but I mean, Luke, from what you know of DeFilippo, I mean, do you have any feeling one way or the other, or obviously Joe too?
I don't know enough about his scheme. I know that both what he did in Cleveland and the scheme he worked in Philadelphia are more about making life easier for the quarterback and less about kind of putting everything on your quarterback's shoulders and then like requiring a perfect, beautiful, wonderful quarterback. Like, he made things very easy on Doug Peterson made things very easy on Carson Wentz, and then made things even easier on Nick Foles. And I think the same thing was true of McCown and Manziel. So whoever we do get, like, it just became a much more favorable situation for the quarterbacks, which, I don't know, maybe it helps in contract negotiations. I don't think that tends to have that big of an impact. I think it's usually just a bidding war. But in terms of who we could get, I think a guy like Bradford is probably out, because DeFilippo worked with him for the entire 2016 offseason, and then he got traded. So I would be kind of surprised if DeFilippo suddenly was like, yeah, let's keep Sam Bradford. I think it definitely would work better with Teddy or Case Keenum, especially because I think you just need a little bit of mobility nowadays. Like, the NFL has evolved to a place where you just need to be able to move a little. And I think in terms of outside prospects, our odds of getting Josh McCown just went up a lot because he worked with Josh McCown in Cleveland. They have a relationship there. And Josh McCown would be kind of a nice, like if your floor is Josh McCown, I think that's a decent spot to be in. So if you got Josh McCown, it would allow you to put a lot more faith in Teddy Bridgewater, and then if that fails, you've got a little bit more of a safety net. So like a Teddy Bridgewater, Josh McCown, and then maybe a draft pick, like that's a quarterback room that I think you can safely enter the season with.
Yeah, I haven't followed Cousins enough to speak too authoritatively on him, but I do like the fact that he's got some mobility. It's not enough for me to love his or accept his price tag, which is going to be huge now thanks to Garoppolo's contract. Yeah. But and I know you're just a Big Ten Bobo, so that's why you want him. But
I think he's good too. I think that is you're completely right though. I mean, I'm not going to deny that, but I also do like the guy.
That's a good point about Sam Bradford. Even that's who I was thinking was going to be part of the equation until and now I have to rethink that because
he's going to have a pretty big detractor in the room, I think.
Yeah, it's I still can't just tie into Teddy Bridgewater until I see him play, and unfortunately,
which is what McCown would be for,
right? Or what about Case Keenum?
I could see that. I'm still of the opinion that I don't think Case Keenum, I don't think that's up to us. I don't think Case Keenum would want to be here.
That's the question.
He has to compete for his own job. I think he could go into the open market, and then a team like I was going to say Washington before they traded for Smith, but a team like Denver would just make him the guy. He's just the guy now. And that's way better for Keenum. He has a lot less of an incentive to stay here unless we offer him the end-all, be-all franchise contract, which I don't think we're going to do to anybody. It really feels like this is the kind of situation where you get two viable guys or draft someone. It would shock me if we don't have a legitimate camp competition at quarterback this offseason. And I don't think Case Keenum would want to be in that. And I think he feels like he's earned a little more.
I'd like to see it's just pie in the sky. It'll never happen. But I would like to see Teddy Bridgewater's contract told, so you get him for $1.5 million, and then you can sign a starter, and they can battle it out. And if you tell Teddy that says, if you can beat this guy out, we're going to sign you to starter money the next year, and maybe then you can do a Case Keenum and Teddy, or a Case Keenum, or I should say, somebody else. But I just don't like. There's too much uncertainty for me, injury wise, and potential with Teddy to just tie into him as your starter before the season starts. They've seen him play in practice, but they've only seen him play 2 series and when live bullets were flying, and it was not good. And I understand all that goes into that because he hadn't played in 2 years or whatever.
2 passes, I think that you can safely throw out. And just say we haven't really seen him play. I think is much more accurate than we've seen him play.
It's not enough to make a decision either way, though. Yeah. I don't think you throw him and say he's great. He's your starting quarterback, because what you have seen is not good, and you've got to give him some time. He's still got to be a guy that works his way back into the starting lineup somehow, not anointed. Because he sat on the bench.
I haven't said he would be anointed. He would have to compete with Josh McCown, who had a pretty darn good season this year and had a pretty darn good season last time he played under John DeFilippo. I also think it seems like Tyrod Taylor's on his way out of Buffalo, and that's another intriguing name I haven't looked too much into. I've also been looking now that Jimmy Garoppolo signed a massive contract in San Francisco with Kirk Cousins. The estimate is that he'll probably have something to the tune of 5 years, $150 million, with over 100 of it guaranteed. So you're tying that in for 3 years, and your Cousins is your guy for 3 years if you do that. And one other thing you said that I wanted to respond to was with Cousins' mobility. Another Purple PTSD writer, Nick Olson, he goes by World on Reddit, where people might recognize him, tweeted out a mashup of some of Kirk Cousins' biggest issues. One of them is pocket presence. He's one of the worst at giving up fumbles, and he's also one of the worst at throwing boneheaded picks under pressure. So I think he's capable of running, and we've seen him run with decent athleticism, but I don't think he's capable enough of making that decision correctly, like someone like I actually think Tyrod Taylor's really good at making the decision of when to bail out of the pocket. Or like Russell Wilson, right? He's like the god of when to. Case Keenum, yeah.
Do you think... I've been kind of surprised by how quiet Keenum has been during this process. I know Teddy had some quotes out there earlier last week or the week before. Luke, do you think that he just doesn't really want to come back here just based on the way that the team treated him?
I don't think he has a reason to want to come back here. I have no idea what Case Keenum himself is thinking because nobody's asked him and he hasn't had any quotes or whatever. But I don't think like his silence is damning or anything. I just think if you look at his situation and like he just put up a career year, right? Like a year of top 10 production by pretty much every way you can measure it. And he's going to want to cash in on that because duh. And I think that there are teams like the Jets or the Broncos or the Browns who will pay Case Keenum way more than the Vikings will, and Case Keenum and his agent would be dumb if they didn't test the market.
Yeah, but the little I did hear from him, he's still, talking nice about this area and how he loves being here. And my intimation from what he said was that he would like to be here, but he's not saying a lot. And I'm sure he's been told, we got to get this offensive coordinator first. As soon as we figure that out, then we start making a decision on the quarterback. He'll have say on that. And, you got to wait for the dominoes to fall. But
and it kind of it goes into how much you believe some of the reports that Zimmer was attempting to motivate him by kind of treating him like crap.
That was all I feel like speculation. I don't think that was a report that Zimmer was saying, okay, now we're gonna activate Teddy Bridgewater because it'll motivate. I think people were just spitballing because they wanted to figure out why Teddy Bridgewater was active but not started. I don't know. That all seemed like a bunch of smoke and people just
I would agree.
Bashing about it on Twitter.
To have a guy like Keenum before the Saints game and the Eagles game and have your head coach basically say, well, we're putting Bradford out there just in case things go sideways because he's a better deep passer than Keenum is. That doesn't seem like the language of a team that's going to stick with that guy beyond that season. It just seemed like they, for whatever reason, they were never completely sold on Case, regardless of what he did for them. So it's I don't know if me and Luke have ever been in this position before.
Yeah. What they're saying to the media and what they're saying to the players themselves are usually two different things, though.
That's true.
No, you don't know what they told me he's going to say, and I'm going to play it this way, and then then we'll keep him off your back and blah 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 blah. So I don't know. I just to go back one step back. I guess maybe not anoint is the word as far as Teddy Bridgewater, but if you're bringing in Josh McCown and he beats out Teddy. If Teddy can't beat him out, that's just neither one of those guys excites me. An injured Teddy that can't beat out Josh McCown, so you have Josh McCown as your quarterback. Then that's a step back from where we were this year, and that's disappointing for me. So that's
it would be disappointing. I think if you are in that situation where if Teddy's at a place where he's not going to beat out Josh McCown, I think you were going back to the drawing board no matter what. I don't see it in the cards to keep Case Keenum around unless you tossed franchise money at him like somebody else is going to. And then you're looking at Sam Bradford, probably not. And then you're looking at Kirk Cousins, which is like having 5 years of Josh McCown. So I think that...
I don't want him either, so...
Yeah, I think what you described with the contract with Teddy of saying, all right, we're going to have you come in here and compete, and if you can beat out a guy that you should beat out if you're healthy, then we'll give you the money. I think that's the way to go. And if he doesn't, then you have to go back to the drawing board at quarterback. You have to start looking at the draft. Next year is a much better year for free agent quarterbacks than this year is, so having a little bit of a stopgap and then taking your shot next year might be a better way to go.
That kills me. The window is, the windows never stay open too long. And the Vikings window is open right now.
Yeah, that's my fear. And again, not to keep pushing my increasingly apparently flawed Kirk Cousins deification, but that's a big part of my reasoning there. I just figured, in a perfect world, if we could have Sam Bradford around the same age, a little bit younger, without the injury history and a little more mobility, that would seem like a win-win for everybody.
I too would like Tom Brady.
And if he could throw a touchdown on every play, that might help. Score early, score often.
Let me put down the people who are worried about the window, because I definitely get that. Like, I'd say we probably have 3 or 4 years where we have this defense in its prime locked down. Especially if we get the extensions, we hopefully we'll have enough money to do all the extensions we want to do in like July, which is when Spielman usually does that. I think if you have a Kirk Cousins, or if you go out and get people are talking about trading for Nick Foles and signing him. If you sign any of these guys to long contracts and you're stuck with them, like having Kirk Cousins for 3 years, you're going to have 3 years of that defense being wasted because you threw a whole bunch of turnovers in the red zone, or threw a whole bunch of pick sixes on third down. Or we're going to be talking about how the defense got wasted because we could never field an offensive line because Kirk Cousins sucks under pressure, and any amount of pressure is going to totally derail him. So I think it's a matter, it's way more important to me to pick the right person than to pick the fast person. Don't pick a bad person just because he's here.
Well, DeFilippo is going to fix all that because he's the red zone whisperer, number 2 in the league this year. The Eagles were. And it was his deal. So there you go. Throw that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not a Kirk Cousins guy. I just think it would sacrifice the defense, and that's the thing that's going to get us to the promised land. We just need Vikings need to get the quarterback that's going to get him over the hump. So
I think we're looking right now in Los Angeles at a situation where we're kind of looking at all these Jeff Fisher refugees. It's kind of the joke of the season. Case Keenum and Foles and Goff and all these guys that Jeff Fisher just ruined. Todd Gurley, and I think come about this time next year, we'll be, if we keep Teddy, this is a mark my words moment. We'll be singing the same tune about John DeFilippo and Norv Turner, and saying that, oh my gosh, this John DeFilippo version of Teddy is what did Norv Turner do to Teddy Bridgewater? We'll be saying the same thing about Norv that we did, that we are currently about Jeff Fisher.
That's a really, really good point, man. I've obviously never been the biggest Teddy guy out there, but I didn't take into account as much how terrible Norv Turner was while he was here.
I think he was a reasonable decision maker, but his scheme was put a lot of leverage on the weaknesses of the roster, and he was not able to adjust for that. His scheme needs a perfect offensive line, and he makes the job of the wide receivers really easy. But he needs a perfect offensive line and a quarterback that can sit back there and survey the field, and he needs to give that guy time to do that. And that's just not how the Vikings roster was composed.
Now he's going to go to Carolina and do it to Cam Newton.
Oh my God, Norv Turner reunited with Matt Khalil. The Angel lost its wings.
Yeah, that's a sign of the apocalypse. But what did you guys? I mean, we've touched on this a lot, but obviously the Super Bowl is on Sunday. We should talk about that a little bit. Joe, you were there, as we've talked about.
I was.
Which is the second time you've been at a Minneapolis Super Bowl, which we touched on off the air because we were talking about whether or not, had the Vikings maybe not have been as close as they were this year, if it would have been more enjoyable, maybe not for you personally, but in terms of the engagement from people in Minnesota as a whole.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I live in the city, so I knew a lot of people that were going downtown every night and kind of checking things out, but I'm not sure on a regional level how much engagement there really was outside of that core area. So yeah, I was just interested in kind of your take on that and comparing it to the 92 game.
92, yeah, was the Super Bowl and 91 season, and I think it did have an effect. I mean, you heard all these reports about restaurateurs saying we never got the rush we thought we were going to get, and I went out and did a number of things. I went to see the Ice Castle in St. Paul, did the zip line across the Mississippi, went to the Super Bowl experience, and just went to a number of things. I went to the concert downtown in Nicollet Mall to see the Jayhawks, and saw the suburbs. We had froze our feet so bad that we couldn't stick around. We couldn't wait another 45 minutes for Soul Asylum to set up and then watch them, so we bailed, unfortunately. But it was a blast. But I was surprised, because you could get really close. And it wasn't the zoo as I thought it was going to be. Now, granted, the weather keeps people away, but I think if Minnesota would have been, you would have had all these Minnesotans just coming downtown and just to be part of it. Whatever was going on, they were going to do it so that, this once-in-a-lifetime experience of the Vikings being in Super Bowl in their home stadium, they had to be a part of it. And I think some of the locals stayed away as a result. I saw plenty of people from, Eagles fans and other parts of the country that were there, but I just didn't see the crush of people that I thought I would. You could park downtown.
Yeah.
When they got all these great local bands playing there, Bob Mole was playing and another band, I can't remember the name, and I thought, wow, where is everybody? But I think it did have an effect. In '92 was the first time it ever happened. There was a lot of people there, and the Vikings were out. I think they were 8-8 that season, so you never had that palpable disappointment because your team wasn't there. They did come so close. They came a game away, but they felt like for a time we all thought that it was going to happen. And when it didn't, I'm sure everybody said, I'll just watch it on TV. It's too damn cold. So I don't know. I think I would have loved to have seen downtown Minneapolis if the Vikings were in. I think it would have just been nuts because, it was certainly a carnival atmosphere, and the perimeter they had set up around the Super Bowl, or I should say around the stadium, was massive. I mean, to get around, just to enter the place, you had to walk blocks around out of the way, and it was they were set up for World War III down there, as far as I can tell.
We drove down there a couple times, and I noticed that too. Like the traffic wasn't as bad as I expected it to be, especially with all the road closures and people not knowing how to drive downtown. But it was interesting crossing Nicollet Mall. They had Hummers with machine gun turrets blocking the traffic, and then they'd let you through, and you drive by and see a guy up on a machine gun turret and be like, man, this is probably a little different than '92, I'm thinking.
Yes, absolutely. I never saw any machine guns in '92. I saw plenty of them. Plenty of them this time around. But it was a fun.
It was cool. So.
Yeah, it was definitely cool. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being at the game. The game was not a good game defensively, but it was entertaining to watch. And there was so much going on, and there were so many big plays, and so many, like what we talked about earlier with just the calls they were making. It was fun. It was just fun to see it. And 505 yards. Say what you will about Brady, 40 years old. Holy buckets! What a performance by him, And the one sack of the game is what unfortunately clinched it for the other team. But
a Michigan guy on a Michigan guy, Big Ten, huh? It always comes back to that.
Did Brady ever actually play in Michigan?
Yeah, he would come in and when Drew Henson was kicking the crap out of somebody.
But he was a backup the whole time, right?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Behind
the Philly special was a troll that was so devastating it got Gronk to think about retirement.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the Patriots? What is the story behind that Josh McDaniels thing? Like, why did he back out?
There's a lot of swirling rumor and speculation, which is so much fun.
Well, I've heard him say his family, and he didn't want to move his family, and there's talk about maybe what's his name, Andrew Luck might not be ready to play next season, and I don't know,
It seems kind of unprecedented to get to that point and then say, well, it's my family,
Yeah, if it were family, he wouldn't have taken the job in the first place.
Right.
I mean, it sounds like he took the job, and then Belichick sat him down, and there's reports that they were up together into the late hours, and Belichick must have made some kind of Godfather offer because that got him out. The speculation that I'm working with is that Belichick is how old is Bill Belichick? He's getting up there.
67?
66, okay, yes.
Yeah, he's not much older than Brady.
but like the speculation is that Belichick might think about hanging it up soon, and then essentially they said Josh McDaniels is the heir, and that was an offer that he couldn't refuse. I don't know if there's any confirmation to that. That's just kind of the thing that was swirling, and that might be, kind of like the Case Keenum motivation thing. It might just be a logical conclusion that people hand around on Twitter. But that's what I got. Or another thing I heard was that just the ownership in Indianapolis was just so highly dysfunctional, and nobody trusts Irsay, and everything is just a mess over there. It's a crappy situation to inherit.
I was surprised he was interested in the first place, because they don't seem like the most stable organization right now.
Yeah, their quarterback is in a worse way than Sam Bradford, it seems like right now.
It's tough.
And they have nobody else on the roster. But, like, McDaniels was, like, hiring people. Like, he thought that was his job. So I think backing out because of his family it just seems like smoke.
Yeah,
So
I agree with you. I mean, the report I heard was Kraft brought him in. He was cleaning out his desk, and Kraft took him into a room and sat him down and basically said that, said, hey, he's not sticking around forever, and, you can have the keys when he's gone. But I don't know. After the way he failed miserably in Denver, I'm sure he's gun shy, and it's more strangeness added on top of that. You hear people talking about, he's not the most, he's kind of immature. Well, if that's the case, I don't know if that's second. If they're saying that in hindsight, because it's not the most mature move, especially when he brought some of his coaches down there. Now they're SOL. I mean, it's like,
wow, that sucks.
Oh, it's incredibly bad. So I don't know. It's a strange deal, but it's amazing how much effect it has had on the rest of the coaching hires throughout the league. I mean, the Vikings obviously moved pretty quickly to get DeFilippo as a result of that, because they're looking ahead at what's going on. So I don't know. It's a kind of a crazy deal, but Brady's got to fall off the ledge here one of these days. It's got to happen.
Yeah, then you got to wonder how much that Garoppolo move is going to hurt them moving forward.
I think 10 years from now, we're going to talk about that as one of the greatest trade fleecings of all time. Yeah. They gave up the future of their franchise for 50 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
Why did they do that? Well, you got to hand it to them, though. Maybe they feel like they can bring up somebody else too, because as we were just talking earlier, Brady was a backup in Michigan, and somehow they pluck him out, and he's could be the greatest quarterback of all time. They've got a good group that recognizes talent. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a good system. Before we go, too, I wanted to touch on the Hall of Fame announcements that came out on Saturday, because I was pleasantly surprised as a major Randy Moss fan and supporter of his reputation, I suppose is the best way to put it, with Vikings fans who still kind of look at him a little cockeyed from back in the day, that he was a first ballot Hall of Famer, which was something I didn't expect, especially with Chris Carter not getting it, and T.O. obviously missed it. I've always kind of put him and T.O. in a different camp, both in terms of skill, but also in terms of what they did negatively in the league. I always thought Moss got kind of caught up with a lot of the negative T.O. stuff just because they were the top two guys at the time. So it was pretty cool to see that he was recognized as, one of the best, if not, well, at least the most talented wide receiver of all time, as people like to put the caveat on it. Maybe not the best, but the most talented. I'd argue both, but
it was interesting to watch Mark Craig's Twitter that day, Joe, because he was on the show here once before, but he's excuse me, he is one of the voters, and there was a lot of people going back and forth, and someone was saying that some guy from Pro Football Focus was giving him grief about all the off-field stuff that Moss had been involved in, and Mark basically said, he goes, I'm so tired of this, what the guy did on the field. If he's deserving to be on a first ballot Hall of Famer, then you vote for him, and that's it, and it was kind of interesting. It was that sentiment is out there. And so I was feeling pretty confident that he might get in, and I was really pleased to see it because I think he certainly deserves it. He was a immature knucklehead when he was here. There's no two ways about it. And as Mark said, he goes, some of the things he called me I can't repeat here on Twitter. But, it's by the same token, I mean, this guy was just incredible. Great work ethic, incredible talent, and changed the way teams reacted to him around the league. I mean, remember the Packers were drafting cornerbacks just so that they could stay with Randy Moss. They knew that they had another 5-6 years to have him to guard. So he deserves it. I'm glad he got it, and hopefully Hutchinson gets in next year.
Yeah.
There's some stuff if you guys want to go reminisce about Randy Moss, or people listening to this just want to go relive his days and just bask in Randy Moss. There is an article that Reef Hassan wrote at Zone Coverage when he got in, essentially making the case that he is the best of all time, and also that the knocks that the media had against him, the off-field stuff, yeah, whatever, that was something, but like the knocks about how he doesn't try, or he's only a deep receiver, or he can't make contested catches and all that. Just debunking the crap out of all of those stupid knocks. And just a lot of really great stuff about how technically perfect he was and technically advanced he was, and how Randy Moss did stuff that nobody's been able to replicate, like how he would turn his head, locate the ball, and then he would not turn his head again until the ball was there, so the corner had no idea when to turn his head up. And you can't turn your head and keep up with performance. That's incredible, and no receiver since him has been able to do that.
Yeah, that's what bothers me about it. I mean, you can't watch the Moss method on YouTube, which showed him working out down in Florida, which is something I think Chris Carter kind of ingrained in him, which is he got lucky that he landed on the team that he did. But the guy was so good at so many different things. I mean, he wasn't just a burner. He was his arguably top 3 hands of all time. His body control was probably the best ever. He was good at basically everything outside of maybe going across the middle, which with a guy like that you don't really need him to.
Yeah, and in a Reef's article, it actually shows a whole bunch of times where it shows that, no, he's actually good over the middle too. He's just amazing at everything. There's also the 30 for 30 that, if you can find it, the ESPN 30 for 30 on him is required viewing.
Rand University, I think it's called.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've seen it a couple times. It's good watching. Yep.
And that does give you a little bit of maybe some sympathy in regards to some of the media stuff, just because I think he was ineloquent in the way that he dealt with the media, and he had a acerbic personality, but I think a lot of it was based on, the Heisman stuff was based on just him being insecure, not him being
No, he probably didn't trust anybody.
There you go.
Mark talked about this one time. He showed up to camp in Mankato with this dog, and one of the reporters asked him, "What kind of dog is that?" He says, "It's a Nunya." Nunya? What kind of dog is that? He goes, "None of your damn business."
I think Randy Moss might have a future in coaching too.
Because he could,
Ooh. You would think so. I mean,
he's coached in high school for a long time, and he's been he's sort of settled into a post-retirement role on ESPN, but also as a mentor to kids and stuff, and trying to make the environment that he came from a better one.
Yep.
But those qualities, that leadership, is something that can be applied, and also, could you imagine Randy Moss being the wide receivers coach? The things he would teach you, holy crap!
Yeah, and none of them you could do because he was a freak.
Yeah.
I think you could teach a wide receiver if he were good enough at tracking the ball to do that thing where you locate the ball and then get to the right spot. I think there are some receivers who are talented enough to pull that off.
I know, I'm kidding.
And he got away with some stuff, some hand stuff, but that's just the play of a savvy veteran, so that's something hopefully he'd be able to impart on some of these guys too. And imagine Adam Thielen being coached by
Oh, God.
Moss. Can you imagine? He would burst into flames.
Oh.
Yeah, but with that, we're kind of up against it. I I know that we were going to probably take a couple weeks off with the Super Bowl being over from the show, unless there's some earth-shattering news in regards to really anything team-related next week. But did you guys have any articles or things you wanted to plug? Joe wrote a piece on Tuesday, was it, maybe?
Yeah, after this.
Talking about the Team of Destiny thing, where I got the title of this week's show from, which is a great read. All your stuff was great, man.
Thank you.
Your Super Bowl coverage stuff too. People can go back and read that and see it from a first person's perspective. But
you're the guy that likes it. That's excellent.
Hey, somebody's got to.
Yes.
So
no, I don't know what I'm planning on next, but there'll be all kinds of stuff to talk about. I know Luke is going to do an OC story. You can just see it's busting at the seams to do one already. You can tell.
I will have a John DeFilippo article that all of you can enjoy in the morning hours.
Ooh, so by the time you're listening to this, that'll be up on
Most
Purple
likely, yeah.
PTSD, maybe on Vikings territory. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I definitely want to thank everybody for listening this season. And we're obviously going to be plugging away during the off season and back for next year to watch Kirk Cousins bring us to the promised land.
Nice.
Promised land of 7-9. Leading the league in turnovers. Let's go.
But yeah, follow us on follow my and Luke's extremely social breakup over on Facebook and Twitter. Follow Vikings Territory also on Facebook and Twitter, and check out our message board. We'll be hanging out there creepily these next few weeks as well. But with that, this has been the Purple Journal Podcast.